Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Intuitive Angling. Welcome back to all the regulars and welcome any people that are new to the channel. Much appreciated you guys taking a little time out of your day to watch the video. And also, man, if you guys hadn't had a chance yet, please subscribe to the channel. At the end of the month, we got a giveaway for Bridgeford Sweet Baby Ray beef jerky. When we hit 60,000 subscribers, which ought to be, I'm guessing, probably in about 3 weeks from now, hopefully. We got a big giveaway of Seaguar fishing line, solar bat sunglasses, Bridgeford jerky. All you have to do is be subscribed to win that. And man, if you guys haven't tried that Bridgeford Sweet Baby Ray beef jerky, man, give it a try. It is the most awesome beef jerky you will ever taste, man. It's just all American made, all the beefs from America here, so it's a good way to support an American made company and a company that supports the sport of bass fishing too. Okay guys, today's topic, a little bit off the wall. I've gotten a few requests, for basically this topic in general. And we're going to talk today about how much money professional bass anglers make. We briefly touched on this in the past, but I really want to take the opportunity in this video to sort of give you guys a thorough examination of the reality of it, what it's all about, and how much bass fishermen make. I think it'd surprise you you may be surprised at what I tell you on it. But anyway, let's start a little bit. I want to lead up to this a little bit. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a history in it, because guys, I've been doing this full time for a living since 1985. So I've got a pretty good pulse on it, what it takes to survive in this sport. Excuse me. And how it's evolved and everything. But I'll start a little bit basically when I started, and let's talk about the 80s, for example, because that's really where it first started getting to the point where you could make a living at it. There really wasn't anyone making a living at it back in the 70s, except for like Bill Dance and Roland Martin. But in the 80s, you started to get it where more people were actually making a living at it. And we're going to go through each decade here a little bit. Back in the 80s, everything, as far as the money that you made in bass fishing, it was all revolved around the Bass Angler Sportsman Society. That's the only way you could make a living. There were 6 tournaments, basically, turned into the top 100 in the late 80s. But basically, the entire pie of the bass fishing money to be made was circled around the BASS circuit and the Bassmasters Classic. Back then, the whole key to making a living in the sport was qualifying for the Classic. There wasn't any social media. There was sport shows where you could speak out a little bit, but in order to get sponsorships from companies, they really only cared about those 35 guys that made the Classic. And if you had some other stuff going on, there were some guys that did lots of seminars that had little deals, but any significant deal was basically guys that won tournaments or guys that were perennial Classic qualifiers. And at that time, it was probably if a pro was making, $40,000 to $50,000 a year from sponsors, that was a big deal. That was a top level pro. They were killing it if they were making $40,000 to $50,000 a year. You only had the tournament entry fees back then were only between $600 to, I think they went up to like $1,500 when they came out with the top 150 circuit. So you had a lot less expenses, fewer tournaments, less expenses. And so if you were making $30,000, $40,000, maybe $50,000 a year, you were doing really good. Now, as it got into the 90s, things started changing a little bit because the Classic started taking on a little bit bigger more significance. More companies started getting into it. The sport was starting to get more mainstream. You started to get more exposure for the sport, and there was more money coming into it. There still wasn't any non-endemic involvement to hardly any degree, a little bit, but most of the company was supported by other companies within the fishing industry. But in the 90s, what you had is the Classic became a bigger event. You had, other companies starting to put more money into it. The tournaments expanded a little bit. There was the Bass Top 150 circuits, so there was a little bit more tournament interest on the bass side, and there were some regional circuits. But back in the 90s, what happened, it stayed pretty much the same until FLW came along in 1996, I believe. And once FLW came into existence, it changed the entire game, because FLW with their association with Walmart, brought non-endemic companies into the company, and they pumped a lot of money into it. The tournament payouts went way up; they just skyrocketed. There was competition between FLW and Bass, and you started having these companies through FLW putting a lot of money into it. So back in the 90s, up until 96 through about 2000, that was starting to be where guys started making a significant income from sponsorships. There still wasn't any social media at that point. There still wasn't much ways to make money other than through the tournaments, but you had this arena through the FLW circuit where you could actually, the non-endemic companies, like I was with Fujifilm through FLW, and you had other companies like Kellogg's and Chevrolet, all this type of stuff, Walmart vendors putting this money into it. And there was a point there that there got to be quite a few people in the sport. The pros were starting to make between $50,000 to $100,000 a year off of sponsorships, especially towards the late part of the 90s. And you supplement that with your winnings. So one year I won close to $200,000 in the 90s. So that with a sponsorship, you were making some pretty good money back in the late 90s. There was several guys, not several, but there was quite a few guys between the combination of tournament winnings and sponsorships that were making between $100,000 to $250,000 a year. It got to that point, and it got really lucrative towards the end of the late 1990s, and that extended into the early 2000s. In my opinion, the height of all this, back when it was at the gravy train was at the greatest, and the income potential for pro anglers was the greatest, from about 1999 to about 2003. During that period, you had a lot of competition between FLW and Bass. You had a lot of non-endemic money coming into it. You had big payouts. There were the Ranger N1 tournament paid $1 million for first. The Forest Wood Cup paid $1 million. Lots of money to be made there. And that back between about 1999 and 2003, there were more people, in my opinion, making a six-figure income from bass fishing than in any period, even today. That period was the golden age for pro anglers making a living at it. I'm going to guess there was probably, at that period, there was probably 20 to 30 anglers out there that were making between $100,000 to $300,000 a year or more if they won a big tournament through fishing. What happened is, as we got into from the mid-2000s up until 2008, the interest in the non-endemic companies started going downhill. FLW lost a lot of their association with Walmart. The vendors started pulling out. Deals started going down. Payouts started going down gradually. And this was a very incremental thing. And if you were making $150,000 a year fishing back in 2001, you started getting knocked back. Maybe you're making 25% less. But everything changed overnight, guys, in 2008 with the stock market crash. When the stock market crashed in 2008, it was devastating to pro anglers. Every single pro angler out there that I know lost between every bit of their sponsorship support to at least half of it. I don't know any pro angler out there, including the biggest names in the sport, that didn't lose half of their income. The payouts went down, sponsorships went down. It was a super tough time. 2008 and the few years after that was an extremely tough time in the sport. And what happened is the economy started to pick up, and the economy's been on a rebound since 2009 every single year. And like I said, now the economy's stronger than ever. Boat sales are through the roof, tackle sales are through the roof, home prices are high. It's just, everything's gotten better since 2009. But the problem, what you had is these companies saw the fact that they could cut back big time and people would still use their products. So what happened, which was sort of how the pros got screwed on the deal, is a lot of these companies realized that, hey, we cut this guy back 75% and he stayed with us. There's no reason for us to pay him what we did back in 2003 because he's going to take this in 2012. And that's sort of what happened to it. The income potential of the pro anglers never has recovered from 2008, not because the economy didn't allow it to do that, But a lot of it was from, just sort of corporate greed a little bit. Another factor that you had in that, and this has sort of been a reality of the sport in general, is that marketing managers for these companies that sponsor pro fishermen, they turn over a lot. There's a real high rate of turnover in the marketing positions. And once you develop a relationship with a certain marketing manager, maybe in 2 or 3 years they're gone and they're replaced by some person that doesn't either know anything about the fishing industry, they don't know who you are, they don't know what you've done, they may have a completely different agenda, and they may feel that it's not worth the expense to sponsor anglers, so they get cut back. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty with that. And this lasted, it still goes on today, but what happened is from about 2004 up until about 2000 and I'm going to guess 2020, it was a tough time. The incomes of pro anglers went down significantly because what you had all these circuits coming out there. You had MLF, you had FLW, you had NFL, NMPFL, you had regional circuits, you had Western circuits, you had circuits everywhere, and all of a sudden everybody's a pro angler, and the pie got cut into 6 billion pieces. There's simply not that much money to go around. So what happened over the past 10 years in fishing is the income potential and the money that pros make has went down drastically, simply because there's too much competition out there. Now, you've got a handful of guys out there that there's, less than 5% of the marquee pros out there that basically hog up 90% of the marketing budgets, especially within endemic companies. Everybody else is just fighting for the crumbs. You got a handful of dudes out there, they're sucking it all down, and everybody else doesn't have any. As a result, this is what's happened. The people that have depended upon sponsorships over the year, they gradually get weeded out, and they've gotten replaced by people that are independently wealthy or come from wealthy families or have families that support them or they have family businesses. This is rampant in the industry even today. Bass fishing has become an elitist sport. Make no mistake about it. It has become an elitist sport. It is not the same it was 30 years ago. The reality of who can fish in the sport is completely different back when I started in it. And that's a product, that's another conversation, but that's sort of the reality of it. So in general, what has happened is the pro angler rosters have been replaced by people that may not be as talented or skilled, but they have the financial resources independently to stay in it. What has happened beyond that, and that's a big reality today, but once the advent of social media kicked in, where you started having YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that type of stuff get really big like it is right now, the performance part of the fishing is basically irrelevant, because you can take some guy, I don't care if you win the Bassmasters Classic or if you win the Red Crest or whatever, you can win 5 tournaments a year, you can win the championship a year, and you are not going to get as many impressions from that or reach as many eyeballs as some 25-year-old YouTuber can get that fishes farm ponds. You just can't, that's just the reality of it. So the people that have adopted and figured out some way to incorporate social media in their fishing have recouped from all this stuff about not being able to get sponsorships or win money in tournaments. So now, if you have a person out there, a professional angler that is a good angler, they do well in tournaments, they got a strong sponsor base, they got a strong social media presence, you're talking about there's some guys out there, there's probably 5% of the guys out there that are making $300,000 to $1 million a year right now from a combination of high-level tournament performance, social media presence, all this type of stuff. There's more money to be made as a pro fisherman now for a small percentage of the pros than there ever has been through the combination of the tournaments and the social media. So there's probably more people out there than you realize right now that are knocking on high 6 figures, maybe low 7 figures in professional fishing if they have everything clicking on 8 cylinders. That's sort of the evolution of it. But I'm telling you guys, the days of you going out there and winning tournaments and getting sponsorships from winning tournaments, you can't survive like that anymore. Nobody is good enough to do that. You cannot maintain that consistency of winning enough to pay your expenses and tournaments and pay your bills at home. If you fish the top level circus, guys, it's going to cost you $100,000 a year, and that's before you pay your mortgage payment at home every month, and all your living expenses and feeding your family, all that type of stuff. You just can't do it. It doesn't exist like it did back 25 years ago. So that's sort of the reality of it, guys. Here's the current reality of how much money pro fishermen make. There's 5% of the guys out there are killing it right now. They're making $300,000 to $1 million a year. You've got, in my opinion, 50% of the other guys out there, at least 50%, are independently wealthy. They got family money. They got businesses. They're independently wealthy. They don't need sponsorships. And then you got everybody else with this. They're the combination of anglers that are maxing out their credit cards, sleeping in the back of their trucks, struggling to get bills paid, sacrificing, doing everything they can to get sponsorship here, sponsorship there, to stay in it. Just really struggling to keep in the sport. So it's tough, guys. I'm telling you. I hear people all the time stop me on the road and say, or at gas station, say, "Man, it must be nice to fish for a living." And I just say, "Dude, you got no idea how much work it is. You got no idea how stressful it is and how difficult it is." Pro fishing, guys, it is not the gravy train you think it is. It is a high stress, high pressure, high risk, low reward sport. You do it because you love it. You don't do it to get out here and get rich. If you're in it for the money, you're never going to survive, because there's not that much money to be made in it, in just the fishing part of it. You've got to do other things. You got to have other gigs in order to make it work, simply because it's so expensive. 30 years ago, it didn't cost $100,000 a year to fish. You could fish all year long, and it may cost you $25,000. It was affordable then, and it's just not anymore. So anyway, hope that sheds some light on it, how it's pro fishermen make. It's all over the board, guys. It really is. But it's something that's evolving constantly with our changing world. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll talk to y'all later. See you.